Hello and welcome to this live stream, and today we're going to be doing a demonstration, and I'm also going to do a little run through of my sketchbook, and I'll probably do the sketchbook in a couple of stages because it's quite long. So if you're watching live, drop me a comment because that'll do two things: let me know that someone is there, and also that YouTube is YouTube can recommend it to other people. So just let me know you can hear me okay. I'm just going to check my microphone. Yeah, that seems to be on. But it might be the first time I've done a live stream and the microphone's been on to start with. So let's start with a little run through of my sketchbook. So I started this year. I actually made a sketchbook that this is made from watercolor paper. I accidentally purchased some of the smooth hot press paper, and I've done that several times over the years, so I've got a few packets of it. So I decided to make a sketchbook because it's actually really good for drawing on. I have done some gouache and watercolors in here as well. So the purpose of my sketchbook is for two reasons: to learn a bit of French because I live in France and my French needs improving, and also to practice my drawing. So that was page one. Page two, a little sketch there. That was a photo I took when we were traveling in France, and inspired by a blue tit, a message bleu. We have plenty of those in the garden, and that's on our walk around our local area. And something I really want to improve on is portraits, so that's what I'm doing here. And there's a lot wrong with those, but you know, I can improve on them. So there's myself and Kate, my wife. And I find the hot press watercolor quite difficult to paint watercolors on. It takes longer for the I think the water and pigment to soak into the paper. But anyway, we'll go through the rest of this book later on in the live stream. So we'll do a demo. So I'll leave that page open. So what are we going to paint today? We're going to have a go at a old barn, so let's just move that out the way and put that there. Get rid of me. So like I say, if you're watching live, do me a favor and just drop me a comment, say hi, and if you're new to the channel, say you're new or whatever. So normal set of palette of colors. Those of you who watch my videos regularly will know I don't change much my my colors on there, but I'll quickly just run through them. I've got yellow ochre, Hansa yellow deep, cadmium yellow, pyrrole orange, alizarin crimson, burnt sienna, burnt umber, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, and neutral tint. And right at the top of the palette, I've got some dried up gouache there, which sometimes I'll use to for various purposes, to make the paint a bit more opaque sometimes, or something like that maybe. So hello, members said hello, so thanks for joining me live, appreciate that. There's a black and white image which I share on the website. The images I use the membership website on tier 2, and also those of you who've joined YouTube membership, if you need the translations, if you check in the description, the photos will be in there. It doesn't always translate the videos, but sometimes it does. So the idea is that you can trace this if you want, as I've done here. Get a nice accurate drawing. Obviously I practice my drawing regularly, so it's up to you whether you trace or draw freehand, whatever you want to do. But the black and white image is useful. I find it's very useful. Sometimes I just do it on my phone to check, because I can see where the light and the dark are. Look at the actual design of the painting. Does it work? Which I think it does. And you know, I'll use that as a reference as well as the color photo which I've got there. So my goal in this demo is to try and get that depth inside the barn there. It looks like, you know, you're looking inside the barn. We've got the dark, and then it gets slightly lighter, perhaps where the reflected light is hitting the wall there. And I just know I need to make sure I get the hard edges in the right place to create that strong contrast. and get the light on the barn. But this is fairly detailed, so I'm not going to go for that level of detail. As you know, this is loose watercolours. So hello Tony, enjoys watching the videos, great. Always good to know that people are watching them. So first wash going in. So my plan of action will be to put the sky in, put some yellow ochre in, get the light values done in first, and then we'll let that dry. So, and the replay for this will be available as soon as this live stream is finished. So you can just go to the channel and watch it there. I will upload it onto the website membership as well, so you can watch it advert free. So that's obviously the advantage of website membership. So it's quite cool in the studio here today, so the paper won't dry as quickly as it normally does, which is useful, but it's not useful from the point of view of trying to keep warm. So I'll go down to about there with the blue, maybe a bit of cobalt blue, just to go over the top to give that a little bit more strength at the top. And then switch to yellow ochre. And those of you who've been watching me for a while know that this is a regular method I use to get a bit of warmth in the sky as much as anything. So if I just pull that yellow ochre up into there, and if I used cadmium yellow, we don't end up with a green sky, but I tend to find with the yellow ochre we don't. And I don't want to go too weak with it because I need that strength of the colour in there to give that warmth. And keep bringing that down. And I'll be putting a shadow across here at the end. I can just warm that up a little bit. So just using a bit of alizarin crimson in there just to warm that up. And that's the first wash done, which is the easy part. And it's quite interesting, a member on our members forum on the website, which I've got a reply to yet, but I thought I'd have a think about the reply, said about that, I think kind of implied that he's quite sort of technical or not loose at all, but I think with loose watercolours you can get the wrong idea that you can paint loose if you're all arty and free and artistic, but I think it's quite the opposite. You know, I wouldn't consider myself to be arty. You know, I suppose splashing a bit of water on there, that's me being a bit arty, but I think you need to have a bit of a technical knowledge to know about how dry the paper is, how damp the paper is, how much pigment's on the brush, etc. To get these effects. So for instance, I know that there's quite a lot of paint to water ratio here, so I could drop some water on before it's dried and really soaked into the paper and started to dry, and then if I just splash some water on, it's going to lift that paint off there. So, you know, I don't know that because I'm arty. I know that because I've painted lots of watercolours and so on. Tony says, do you realise and accept that you are a talented artist, or do you actually continue to strive from yourself? I don't believe in talent. Let me go to the other camera for a second. I think the misconception with talent is confused with the will to want to paint, and that's what I have, the will to want to do it. If you looked at my early paintings, they were rubbish, particularly the watercolours, but you know, they weren't rubbish, they were just my first attempts, which is expected how they would be. And you know, the old saying that the more I practiced, the more talented I became, you know, and so on. But I think, you know, I just say, yeah, I'm talented now. But I suppose I may have an eye for drawing, maybe a little bit. That I was always quite good at drawing when I was young, but you know, still made lots of mistakes. And my early drawings were, again, not great, but I've certainly improved fairly recently by doing more drawing in my sketchbook. So yeah, I'm not a big believer in talent. I'm a more of a practice and get better and have the will, and I've got goals to reach that. I regularly look at the master paintings of the artists gone by and know I've got a long way to go to reach the level they got to. But you know, the artwork I'm looking at is probably 40-50 years into their career, so I'm 20 years into it. So this needs drying, this bit of paper now. And also, this is all but dried, if I take my water bottle here and just drop a few bits of water on there, we'll get this splatter effect, which is going to cause runbacks and all sorts. That could be enough for the texture in there. And in my sketchbook, which I'll show some more of these, I've done some portraits in these sketchbooks, for a reason really, so I can just judge to see how, you know, if I'm getting any better or not. But I've done a few in here that I shall show you the rest of these at the end of the demo. And I finished the book, which is why I thought I'd do the talk through the book. So I've started a new book, and I thought it'd be a good idea to put a self-portrait in on the first page. So eventually I shall have hundreds of these books, and then I can look back to see my progress, hopefully, and hopefully it is progress. Like I said, I'll go through those books with you at the end of this live stream. So paper's now dry again. Can now put in those distant hills. So not too dark, and steering towards, obviously, well, just is blue really, but it's just a suggestion there of distant trees and so on. That's fine, don't need any more than that. So, what to do now? I think I could probably paint the roof and paint the rest of the barn, get that all done. And the trees I'll paint afterwards, because I'll get a nice crisp edge to get that contrast of light and dark across there. And then, you know, not much more to do really. It's quite a simple painting, this one. And painting loose is only tricky when we just overthink it. You know, we always just try and do too much. You know, if we just paint it simply, literally, you know, there's on this scene here, there's lots of detail on that roof, but it probably would benefit from just keeping it simple. Maybe just throw some of that blue into that very watery red. Leave a little bit of light coming through there. Maybe just take a little bit of cadmium red. A bit of blue. Just to cool it off here, perhaps in the shadows. And that's, you know, that's enough. Any more than that is just fiddling around with it. So I need a nice crisp edge across there, so I'll need to wait for that to dry, because if I try and do it now, it's gonna, if I put a dark there, it's gonna run up onto there. So I shall just hold fire for the moment on that. So what I could do is perhaps paint this area here. That obviously you can use the hairdryer if you want to just paint that area now, but no reason why we can't just paint another area that is already dry. There's some neutral tint with a touch of red in there. So that's got very little water in there because I need a real strong dark in here. And from about there, it starts to get a little bit lighter. So I'm just going to use a bit of pyrrole orange, which will just make that go a little bit more towards brown. Simplify. That's actually damp, so that's run into there, but I'm going to put perhaps a bush there or something. But just embrace your mistakes. That on our members live stream on Thursday, we did that. Made a few mistakes, but just embrace it. We actually did a Seago master study, and he had a great big run back on his boat. So we kind of came to the conclusion, if it's good enough for Seago, it's good enough for us. So there is an oak beam going across there, but I'll lift that out afterwards. Let's zoom in a little bit. Let's move the camera over there. And you'll find if I start messing about with that rum, where it's melting into there, it'll make a mess. But if I just leave it, it won't probably get noticed. So where I want to try and get this dark in here, it all needs to be done wet into wet, so we get this soft edge, so it looks like it's in the shadows. So I can lift out a little bit there just to lighten that. So this is perhaps the reflected light off the grass hitting that wall. And just always have in mind with if you're trying to paint loose watercolors, less is often more. So it's starting to dry now, so I can just lift out a beam there. Maybe a suggestion of that wood there. And I suppose it's tricky because you can't really judge the painting until it's finished. So there's that little bit of something growing on the top of the barn. There's lots of old barns in rural France where I am here, where they were once working farms and now perhaps no longer. But they quite often get snapped up and renovated. It's good. Dark in there. And just knowing when you need to stop, because once the paper starts to dry, you get those start lifting the paint off and so on, which you don't want to do, which I'm almost there. So a bit of green for the grass. Let's zoom back out so you can see the palette. So there's a little bit of grass area there. Oh, picked up red, but I shall steer that more towards blue. And I try to connect shapes up wherever I can. So I can paint that grass area into there. And I shall just accept any little run backs or whatever. Bit of light in there. So I could paint that tree while we're there, why not? So I think hands are yellow and the cobalt blue make quite a nice warm green. So, and rather than trying to paint a really detailed tree, I'm just going to keep it flat. Where I had that run into there, so I've just got a little bit of that blue mountain off in the distance. Can just a little bit of light off of that. And before that dries, I shall just drop a dark in there because we need the darks to make it appear light. And that's fine for there. Any more than that, and we've connected that tree to this shape here. So happy with that. And while I've been doing that, this is all dried now, so we can work over this side. Thank you, Tony, for the comments. Appreciate that. So, excuse me. I shall wait for that to dry a little bit before I paint there, because I don't want to cause a run back there, because that's looking okay. So let's work perhaps on the side of this building here. So let's go dark but warm for those darks under the eaves. So if you put light against dark, it's going to have more effect. So that adds a bit of interest. And it's quite abstract, the barn here, the roof where it's collapsing and falling down and so on. So, you know, it's perhaps a bit tricky to try and replicate it as is. So just take inspiration from it. But it's the dark that's important. And then we've got some cooler greys, and I regularly get comments to say, why don't I call out the colours as I'm mixing? I know I've covered this many times, but it's impossible. You know, I don't know, because I'm mixing into other colours. That, for instance, is blue, which had a little bit of paint on there, a little bit of paint in the corners, steering it towards red. Back to the cobalt blue. Add more water. You know, it's impossible to give you the exact mixture. But the only way to do it and know yourself is to paint. So it's just a very watery purple there for the shadow on the side of that building. And I want a soft edge in there, so I shall just add a bit of water there. Just to, what I do is I rinse my brush off, just dry off the moisture off the brush. And again, don't judge this part of the painting, because we've got a dark tree to go in there. There's a tree there, and so on. You just got to, you know, look at what have you painted. You know, is it correspond to what's there? Does it look okay? You know, but you can't judge it until the rest of it's done. So I'm just going to put a bit of water on there, just create a bit of texture on that building. Bit of neutral tint, straight from the tube, so it's a real strong dark in there, thick paint. And I could scratch out maybe a few tiles. And it's hard to tell, you know, that the rooftop looks a little bit weak at the moment, but I'll wait till I get the trees in. I could always put a wash over it if need be. So sometimes it's best to get everything covered before we start putting washes on. Hello, Chris. Chris has joined us, a member of the website. So it is much appreciated that those of you who are supporting me in a financial way via the website or on YouTube memberships. That I certainly advise you to join the website if you speak English, but if English isn't your first language or you're not comfortable with English, YouTube does offer translations for a lot of the videos, although it doesn't seem to do the live streams for some reason. I don't know why, but what I try to do is perhaps just upload it as a normal video for members on YouTube, and then it might get the translations. So we've got an old barn door there. So we've got some hard edges in there, so I shall wait for that to dry a little bit, because I suppose that's what you've got to sort of think as well, is to get hard edges you need dry paper, and soft edges damp paper. And you just need to know how soft and or how dry or damp the paper is, which is why it's so tricky. But that's what makes it fun. It's a challenge. Tony says he's just returned to watercolours and finding it tricky. Yeah, I started with watercolours 20 odd years ago and soon gave up on watercolours because it's just too difficult. And then I had to go with oils, found that difficult, so I did acrylics, a bit more success with that. And then eventually went back to oils, but my desire to paint watercolours was too great. So I ended up back painting watercolours, but it took many years to become confident in painting watercolours. So a nice translucent wash there. And again, I'm going to need some hard edges in a moment, so no point painting on that just yet. So that all needs to probably dry before I do anything else, so I can perhaps paint this tree here because that's dry. So again, cobalt blue and hands yellow. So I quite often use this is a Skoda Perla size 12, commonly used by artists painting in this loose style. For these trees, I sometimes use it on its side. And something I've really realised recently is you do need to make sure you get these sky holes. That so I made a point of that on the members live stream on Thursday, that I did the sketch first in my sketchbook, or a portion of it, and I ended up having to put the sky holes in with gouache in my sketchbook, because without these sky holes it just looks a bit dead. So put more in than you think you need. Sometimes I might even use my finger, make sure your finger's clean, you know, for the outer part of the tree. That gives you the smaller branches. That works quite well. And it's darker along the top here. Old barns make great subjects for painting watercolours. Boats and barns. Also quite like lighthouses in watercolour. But I paint all sorts of subjects. But I've got some more channels, which I'll talk to you about after we finish this live stream, that I've started to do some exhibitions, online exhibitions, and my thinking there is to try and sell some artwork. Not necessarily expecting you guys to buy artwork because you're painting it yourself, but to attract a different audience. So it may not be a channel you want to subscribe to, but I shall tell you about it anyway. I suppose even if you're looking to sell your own artwork, you might find it useful. I shall share any ideas that work, ones that don't. It's always been a challenge to sell artwork. I've got an exhibition in our local cafe in Chassignon, so I'm covering up these sky holes already. Don't want to do that. But as you probably noticed, a lot of artists go the route of doing videos on YouTube and have their own memberships and so on, but which has sort of made it mean that I don't have to sell artwork. So it's just nice to sell artwork. But probably for the last 12 months, I've just really haven't tried at all to sell artwork, because I'm just so busy doing this. But I've got a lot of artwork collecting up in my barn, so I need to do something with it. So just dab that with a tissue, bit of texture maybe. Give it a little spray. But not fiddling with it. Fiddling with your watercolours is what causes problems, and painting when things aren't dry and so on. So appreciate the comments. It's certainly made the live stream to be more visible on YouTube. That it's quite interesting that some of my videos I just post, some of them get quite good numbers of views, but the live streams don't necessarily. But I came to the conclusion that the people who watch the live streams are the die-hard watercolor artists who follow me. So it's a good indication of how many people are genuinely watching and painting with vengeance. And that's what you've got to do with watercolor. You know, it's unfortunately you've got to be at it constantly. And that's when I noticed the improvement for me, is when I gave up normal jobs and became a full-time artist. That was in the UK when I was actually selling artwork to fund that. It was a challenge, but I did manage it just about. But then when we moved to France, I decided to go the route of become a YouTuber. So little bits of detail on there. So that looks a little bit stuck on. So I'm going to need to soften it a little bit. So what I'll do is I just clean my brush off, just make it damp. Let's zoom in. And I'll just manipulate those a little bit. So there's no water on the brush really, it's just dragging that damp paint on there. I went possibly a little bit early, but the paper hadn't quite dried. I thought it had dried. So it happens. So I'm going to go a little bit darker up here. But again, you know, don't judge it until the painting's finished. You know, it's very easy, and I'm sure I've done it, abandoned a painting or started to really try and fix something that didn't need fixing. You know, I'm not adverse to using a bit of gouache if necessary. That if something needs a bit of life putting back into it, you know, I'll use a bit of gouache if necessary. That should be dried now. So let's put a dark in, a bit of red with that neutral tint. So we've just got a strong dark shape there. And you'll probably be surprised how much or how thick the paint I use. You know, for these darks, it's hardly any water at all. But I use Rembrandt tubes mainly. I've got some Daniel Smith as well. So I think they stay wet quite well on the palette. So the paint is always, you know, I don't squeeze fresh paint out every time. You know, I close the lid. If I'm not going to be painting for a while, I put a damp tissue in the palette, which keeps the paints moist. Obviously, if you left it for a long time, they probably would go mouldy, but I've not had an issue. So just a little bit of texture detail. Maybe that barn door was once upon a time red. Looks like a barn door, I'll go with that. So another tree here. Neutral tint mixed in with that. So again, you know, no idea what colour I used to get to there. It's just a dark that steers towards green, possibly greeny brown. So I'm just using the very tip of the brush to get these branches, make sure they're nice and thin there. Make sure they're thicker at the base, and don't worry about trying to paint all of them. And if I just take off a lot of the moisture off the brush, and yet Tony says sometimes magic comes at the end. Exactly, that you know, it might just be those final few marks you put in, and obviously it can go the other way as well, that you can overwork it. I've done that many times. People often tell me on YouTube it looked fine at this time on the video and then you put that in and overworked it, you know, it happens. But the thing to remember at the end of the day, it's just a painting. It's just a piece of paper. You can always paint it again. Scratch out a little bit. So we've got dry paper there, so I can get that dark in there. So going back to the whole, you know, if you're not necessarily a loose painter or artistic and all that sort of stuff, it really, I don't think it matters. You know, if anything, if you're more technical and can figure out how to paint this, you'll have more success. For instance, you know, if you know that has to be dry to get that hard edge in, you know, you're going to be ahead of everyone else who just thinks they just do all arty farty, and it all just happens by magic, because it doesn't, I can assure you. So nice strong dark in there. That's going to make that barn really stand out. And again, hardly any water, real thick paint here. It's the only way to get darks, and we need these darks to make it look light. And side of the barn, there's something growing up there. And something I've sort of said to the members as well, if you can't really make out what's there, this looks like there's some kind of wall or something, just simplify it. You know, you don't have to paint the you know, the gate and everything that's there, if there is one, because I can't really tell. Just look at, what is it, a shape, and what's it serving as a purpose is just something there that takes us in. Maybe break it up a little bit. Yeah, it looks good, we'll go with that. And in the reference image I can see distant trees, more detail, but it's not necessary for this painting. You know, this is a loose watercolor, and this is probably more detailed than I normally do. So, tree there, which is connected up to that wall or whatever it is. So again, thick paint, blue, hands are yellow. Plenty of sky holes, because we know without the sky holes it's going to look a little bit lifeless. Neutral tint. So maybe less sky holes, you know, where you perhaps want less sparkle, which perhaps in the centre on the bottom of the tree there, but give it a little spray. Again, I shall just lift a little bit off there. I think we've finished with the green there, so I shall wipe that off. So we need, I think, a bit of a warmth. I'm going to go for a pyrrole orange, and I'm just going to, didn't really want to have to touch that again, but just a bit of warmth over there. So that's almost just glazing over there. And I'm going to go just a little bit darker at the top where I've, I suppose, washed it off a little bit. I really want to get that to look like it's dark in there. But it had to be done while it was damp. So this is fiddling. Now in an ideal world we get it right first time, but that doesn't always happen. But sometimes I think it's best to perhaps just accept you haven't got it perfect, but it's fresh. Now, if you try and make it perfect, you can lose the lovely qualities of the watercolor, of the freshness of it. Right, there's a dark side there of that post. And cooler blue. Too much paint there. I'll do for the shadow probably. Just put a little wash. Okay, what's wrong? If something's wrong, normally it's to do with tonal values, which is what I've got here. Problem with the tonal values on the door there. Needs to be darker. So what do? Just make it darker. Darker and more rustic is what it needs. And maybe just a few hard edges. And don't be afraid to, like I say, use those fingers. Creates a bit of texture. And it's just a dark top of that window. Right, any more than that's fiddling about. So what we'll do, I shall just go through the second part of my sketchbook, and then we'll put the shadow across there and bring that painting to a finish. So we're almost there. Move that out of the way for a second. Put it on there. So let's just put the chat up. So we will finish that painting, don't worry. Let's put my camera on. Are we still on there? So yeah, we're still here. So we got to, on the sketchbook I was showing you, so I made this by hand with watercolor paper. I think we got to the blue tip, didn't we? And self-portraits. So if you missed the first few pages, it'll be at the beginning of the live stream. So some chickens, a bit of lifestyle. I don't paint many animals, that they don't tend to do particularly well on YouTube for me, but I'll explain actually the other channels I've got. Let's have a look. Different channels. So these channels here, I've got my watercolor channel top left, and that's the one you're watching at the moment. So that's where I share my full tutorials, and the one to the right is my oil painting channel, which is my second channel, which is the full oil painting demos. And then I started another channel called Robert Mee's Art World. So I've shared some of my sketchbook drawings on there. Some of them are time lapse, which I know aren't much use to you really, but it's for entertainment value. And I've shared the process I use for creating images for doing the demonstrations, and that's what they are. A lot of these images I make on Midjourney, they're for demonstration purposes. If I wasn't doing YouTube anymore or doing any more demonstrations, I probably wouldn't use those. I might do possibly because it's a good learning tool, but I would go outdoors and just paint from life, I think is what I would do now. And then I started another channel just recently, which I haven't told anyone yet, called Fine Art Collection de Vigilé, and that's where you might have seen recently I did some online art exhibitions. So that's where I'll share those. So the idea is that for those of you who just want to watch the full tutorials, don't subscribe to those other channels, but those of you who are perhaps quite interested to see my online exhibitions and the other stuff I'm doing with perhaps digital art or the gouache that I'm doing in my sketchbook, you know, you can follow those. So the links are in the description of my videos for those different channels and on this live stream. While we're there, I shall quickly show you on my website that if you want to join me on memberships, I say if you don't speak English, which you probably wouldn't understand what I'm saying now, that YouTube's probably your best option. But if you speak English, go to the website, which is www.workshops.com. Again, links in the description. Click on Become a Watercolour member. And then if you go to this page, you can then join on a monthly basis, which you can just cancel any time. Or currently we've got an offer on that you can get 30% off of that price with that code. And that gives you 12 months access. And those of you who paint watercolour and oils is a combination tier, so you can actually get the watercolour and oil demos. So that's that one. And while we're doing sales, Kate, my wife, who runs the website, I do the membership side, but Kate does the selling of art. But she's added a clearance gallery on there. But so if you want to grab an original watercolor or an oil painting, there's some on there. And again, there's a discount on the main watercolor gallery as well. So what else we got to tell you? Yes, that's me wearing a tarte, which is a traditional French berry that the other day we was in the our French conversational group that trying to improve our French, and my neighbour who wears this hat came in. I was sat by the door, so he opened the door and came in, and I didn't see who it was, and he put his hat on my head and made everyone chuckle. It didn't improve my French, but I thought I'd have a go at painting it in oils. But, again, something to improve on, but that was quite good fun. So back to the sketchbook. So I'll just quickly run through this and then we'll finish this demo. I don't want to bore you. Cows, my nemesis, getting better at them. And that was quite a nice little demo. That's on my other channel, the Rob Me Art World. I think I used gouache in that one. I forget. I do so many paintings, I forget what medium I use sometimes, but it looks like gouache. That definitely was gouache that I painted that misty scene in watercolours, oils and gouache. Again, more old barns. And I've done an oil painting of that. So again, as much as anything, it's the French phrases that I'm after to try and learn a bit of French. And that was from our local festival, Voce Classique Française, or Festival de Village. So if Chris is still watching, he'll be listening to my French and scoring me. There we go. Let me bring up the chat back again. There we go. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, Chris is a member of the website. Give them the approval. More barns. And not sure about that one. That I did actually do a demo on the membership, which did come out quite well. I didn't get enough light here. So what I tend to do, if I do a page that doesn't work as I wanted it to, I'll put some gouache over it. Gesso, sorry. Put some gesso over it and then do a painting. There was another page in here that I did that with. So something I really like about pencil drawings. They look great. So that was a gouache painting. More barns. I think I'm obsessed with barns. My cat Rusty. But yeah, there was a drawing under there or a painting I wasn't happy with, so I put some acrylic gesso over it, and then I did a gouache painting, and that's a yoke. Chateau Sarze, old Chateau near us. Toad. Again, practicing portrait, that's a study after Sergeant. Fisherman. That's me chopping the axe. So you've always got a model. You can always get someone to take a photo of yourself, and you've always got a reference to paint. Obviously, there's loads of royalty-free stuff out there to paint from. But, so I would advise, you know, if you want to improve, practice your drawing, and honestly, you can learn to draw. I don't believe in that no one, that somebody just can't learn to draw. And drawing is just learning to see, learning to measure. And I often look at these negative shapes. For instance, the shape between the arm and the handle on the strimmer. I would draw that shape to get the shape of the arm, things like that. There's Rusty. And that's a gouache portrait. That's a snow scene that we've done on memberships in watercolour and oils. Also, I'm using this sketchbook for maybe to test out ideas, to see whether it will work as a demo. Nearly there. Don't worry. Don't go anywhere. And sketch that I turned into an oil painting. Master study. So I'm getting running out of ideas what to paint in here, so I turned to some master studies. On Fleur, we did a watercolour on the membership of that. Bella, this is a pug, a family dog. Not our dog, it's a family member's. Snow scene, nice to get a bit more snow hopefully. The dreaded cows, getting better. Monet and Sir Alfred East. On the other channel, Robert Me Art World, I've got chapter 1 of his book on there that I put on there. More sketches. And quite often I do these sketches late at night because I'm terrible for leaving things lasting. But I've done one of these every day for the past, I don't know, 60 odd days. And quite often it's done at 10 o'clock at night or something. Quite often sat in front of the television doing it. Seago there, which inspired me to do the demo. And then a couple of little watercolours. I say that's where I didn't leave enough sky hole, so I put it back in with gouache, but it's never the same. So lesson learnt. And that's it. That's that book done. And like I say, at the beginning I did show, started a new book, and that was page 1. So page 2 will be tonight. Not sure what I'm going to do yet. So let's finish this demo. Get rid of that, and then we want that. Get rid of me. What do I do with the painting? There we go. So it's coming along well, and actually sometimes it's not a bad idea to have a little break from it. That I normally obviously just paint them in one go, but once the painting's dried like this, there's no reason why you can't stop and come back to it. If you're not quite sure what to do, and that's the tricky part, is knowing what to do next. And I'm sure you've all experienced that. I know I definitely did, of being in this position here of just not knowing what to do, and that's when you'll make mistakes because you don't know what to do. But that just comes with experience. So if you just look at what you're painting and let's take a bit of paint off and just look at what's different. I need some grass growing up the side of the barn there. So brush on its side, not too much water on the brush. And there's the grass growing up the side of the barn there. And I'll just use just a damp brush just to soften that underneath. And probably needs dark in there. And I could scratch out, but again, I'm not adverse to using a bit of gouache. I know the purists will hate me for it, but I have no intentions of sharing any artwork or doing exhibitions with the Royal Society of Art, watercolours or whatever, so that needs to be painted up to there. A bit darker. So let's do this wash at the across here, and that's just going to finish the painting. That will. And I could do with put that post in there, just Again, I'm just using a damp brush, nothing, not adding much water there. That's fine. So, bigger brush, because I'm covering a bigger area. So what colour to do that? No idea. Let's make it nice and watery, mix all this together, which will give me a grey. I think we probably want to, you know, if I put green over that, green is going to mix with that red and give me probably purple, brown. So probably not a good idea. So I shall just go for a purple because it'll look nice and it's going to work better, I think, with that red what's there, because it's closer on the same side of the colour wheel. So let's just go for it. We'll leave a few little bits of first wash to come through. And the side of the brush, longer bits of grass. And again, I like this Pro Art 9A sword brush, not sponsored, but it's a cracking brush for just doing all this sort of stuff. So some longer bits of grass. Now we could even have just a longer one there. It just connects this foreground to that there. Now if the barn's in that sort of state, it's probably not had the grass cut recently. And just throw water on there. Just dropped a bit of red into that just to give me a darker. And we can use some of these darker bits just to lead us into the scene. A Z or something, maybe. But we don't need to overwork the foreground. No, that's probably enough. And I think probably a bit of a warm brown, maybe, just to close that end off a little bit. But we want to keep that light there because that's working well. So just the rooftop now, which is not quite right. The pyrrole orange is probably one of the last colours I've added to my palette, which is a really nice transparent orange, great for doing these glazes. Now if we want to just warm up that foreground a little bit, not too much, and the sun is hitting the side of that building, so those long blades of grass are just side there. Again, I'll use my fingers. And any more than that is going to be overworking it, I think. So just give that a little spray. So that line there might have just been a bit harsh, so I'll just make it wet and get rid of that. So I think probably to unify the painting, probably a glaze of pyrrole orange over that rooftop. Let's go for it. Unfortunately, that the sort of major thing you might have to do at the end could be the thing that just destroys it. So I shall just have a clean tissue in my hand in case something does happen and I can just wipe it off. So if you can do it in one stroke, the better it'll be. Maybe just lighten a bit of texture on there. That's worked okay. And now I'm at the stage where I'm looking for things to do, which is normally a good indication that you've probably finished it. So let's dry it off, take the tape off. Zoom out a little bit. Let's take away the reference. You don't want to be looking at that because you're just going to be constantly comparing your painting to that. And take the tape off, reveal that lovely edge. Thank you, Tony. And Danny, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Now there we go. It's worked quite well, and it's got lovely colour harmony. The pyrrole orange glaze on the roof, I think, made it for me. We've got nice soft edges in here. A mistake there that you only know about because I've just pointed it out. No, same here. But we do it as artists. We're terrible. We say, we show a painting to someone. Oh yeah, but that didn't work. This didn't work, and that didn't work. Don't do that. It's let them see it for themselves, and they'll decide what's good and what's bad. And it's fine as a painting. It's quite nice. And I think that was the painting we did on the live stream for members, a Seago study. So just remember that if you do a painting, it doesn't work, watercolour can be painted on both sides. But I would call that a success, and I'll sign it, and it'll probably go on our clearance gallery on the website. So whoever buys that will be getting a bonus painting on the back. But I've kind of stopped doing that now. That I used to paint on both sides all the time because I wasn't thinking about selling the artwork or whatever. But well, I had painted on that one both sides. That was a nocturne, but that's just on one side, which is probably not a good idea to paint on both sides when you've got something you want to keep and possibly sell. That was on the live stream. So there we go. Thanks for joining me live, much appreciated, and thanks for all the comments, and thanks Brian. And the replay is available straight away once I finish this live stream. And for members, I shall get it uploaded onto the website, so it'll be advert free. And I'll share all the reference images on the members forum for members on tier 2 as well. So until next time, bye for now, and good luck with your watercolours.